Excellent. Thank you for having me. As he said, my name is Hilary Walters, and I'm the Early Years Advisor with the Early Years Department with NAN. The department is made up of actually two parts. I am part of the Early Years development, working with children and families, developing resources and building capacity for our future centers. And the other part of our the early years team is part of the IELCC, the Indigenous Early Learning and Childcare Framework. So together we are a duo dynamic. Together we are working strong and working hard at building opportunities and unique possibilities across the far north. So today I wanted to share with you a little bit of a neurodiversity overview as well as an autism strategy. But in keeping in time, I'm going to do a bit of condense. We're going to get to our autism strategies, and then I'm going to flip over to understanding about what the national framework is about. As a few of you were asking me a little bit about what was happening, what's going on, and there is a little bit of news. It's coming slowly, but we're getting there. So there is a little bit of an update. And I look forward to start sharing that. Okay, let's see how this works. Where am I pointing? I think we need more batteries. There we go, maybe. So to begin, we're going to do a little start just to kind of put us in a frame of how the educators and children in classrooms, just to start to shape kind of our going into our neurodiversity talk. Go ahead, thank you. Oh, sorry. This isn't the correct video. Thank you.
Dear teacher, I know it doesn't always seem like it, but I really do want to listen and learn. It's just my brain is kind of different. So this is what I'd like you to know about me. I have to move, or I really can't pay attention.
Even though I'm not looking at you, I can still listen to what you're saying.
If you tell me, sit up straight, now I have to use all of my brain to do just that.
It makes me feel sad when you tell me to try harder, even though I've already tried as hard as I can. I actually listen better when I'm rocking in my chair. When you give me a bunch of directions, I start to think I will never remember all of this. Sometimes my mom or dad ends up doing all of my homework. So here's how you could maybe help. Let me get up and move while I'm learning.
Let me look wherever I want when you talk to me.
Let me rock or slouch in my chair.
No matter what, please don't take away my recess. Give me help I could do all by myself. Make directions very short.
Just ask me, what does your brain need right now?
And one more thing. My brain might be different than yours, but it's still amazing. Sincerely, your student.
Your student.
Your student. Your student.
I stumbled across that video after I had some children telling me about how their brain worked. And I thought, wow, this is an amazing segue to talking about neurodiversity and how children's brains are working in today's classrooms. And if we think about, oh, they're doing their magic. Look at them. Thanks. If you think about all of the different unique
That's our neurodiversity.
happening in an environment. Oh, they're just having a, yeah, simply just go back to the slideshow, please. Thank you. And I'm going to advance. Oh, maybe. Okay, there we go. Thank you. But maybe you're closer, possibly. Okay, so you go ahead to the next one. So simply, this is an overview to enhance individual knowledge of neurodiversity, increase skills on how best to support children, as well as gain confidence when working with children and families. Okay, so neurodiversity in itself is the idea that people matter and they have rights. regardless of how their brain works. Neurodiversity includes people with ADHD, intellectual disabilities, mental illness, Down syndrome, dementia, traumatic brain injuries, and many, many more, as well as autistic people. So how new is neurodiversity to everybody? Are we still trying to get we're trying to all still get a grasp of kind of what this all means. And why you're kind of confused is because it's a lot of everything. It's little bits of everything kind of all encompassing into a unique set of our brain. And like a fingerprint, our brains are unique to ourselves. So think about it like that. When you think about your fingerprint and how a brain actually kind of looks, we need to start thinking about that. It's not, we have to think about how we can encompass all those abilities and things that we want to do in a different brain set of all these different children and all the different little beings. So again, so it's someone brains processes differently. That might be not typical. So we're using a lot of this atypical and typical language as well, because we don't want to refer to as a deficit as a difference. So we really like that unique set, because everybody, if we sat down long enough, may have something that is unique to their own, which is type of that or neurotype. When I go to bed at night, I'm a cricketer. I stem, I rub my feet. It irritates my husband to all ends of the world, but that is my thing. That's how I self-soothe. So even as adults, you may not realize, but these are all the things that make us unique. And it's okay. It's just the way it is. It is what it is. Go ahead, click. So we want to increase acceptance and inclusion of all people and just simply embrace how brains work. So in approximately between 15 and 20% of the population have neurodiversity differences. The challenge is that many neurodiverse people face more challenges having to do with the existing environment that they are put in. That's where the challenges are. They as beings are usually quite capable and can function highly well, but when they're put into different environments, this is when it changes. Dynamics change. And I think at any point in your life, you may have walked into a place, an atmosphere, an occasion, an event, and you just kind of said, whoa, this is not my space. But yet we don't recognize children to have that same sense of autonomy to say, I'm not okay with this and you're not uncomfortable. For some reason, we haven't quite said it's okay to have that. So we have to start figuring out how we can give them some autonomy over their own feelings and decisions and how they can be present in their own space or in our space together. Go ahead. So traits and qualities. So some of the most amazing things of people with neurodiversities, they have a strong sense of routine. They sometimes can be hyper-focused on many, many things, or they can really tune things out really well. Difficulty with traditional speech and language. Some children can speak. Some children have very small or to intonated speech, and some people are just have no or very small level of speech. But when they want something, you'd be surprised that they are very vocal, or they'll make a way to be very clear on their intentions and their needs. Struggling in social settings, it can be very uncomfortable, and they don't read body cues very well. So they're not understanding that somebody could be engaging and they could be actually engaging in a intense conversation. They don't read that. So they just kind of go in and to join the conversation, and they're not reading the room. And so that's where that social disconnect, that social disruption happens. Go ahead. So they sometimes will not engage in verbal communication, show expressions or emotions. They like repetition and movement. They want to keep moving, flapping, clapping, fidgeting, stimming is kind of one of the words that we use. Challenges to adapting to new routines. Many children do not like changes of routines, and sometimes we forget that as educators, we need to give a clear advance warning. We need to give timelines. We need to give what's next, what's happening, regardless of of any type of child. It's really important that children have some sense of autonomy and understanding of what's going on in their world in a day-to-day. And some children can respond to it easier than others, and some children need a little bit more information or a time to process to that next transition. And overreaction to specific sounds, sights, textures, tastes, and smells. This is actually probably one of the most unique things that actually triggers some of those other reactions. It actually isn't the reaction that should be focused on. They're reacting to something that's happening already in their environment. And we sometimes forget that, oh, maybe the sun's really bright and the way it's shining in through the blinds is really, it's hard on the eyes. Sometimes smells, all these wonderful perfumes and soaps, but they can be really triggering. I had one little boy who hated Tuesdays, and I couldn't understand why. He'd say, I go home, my house stinks on Tuesdays. And it was when the cleaning person would come in. So he'd go home and the smells. So he hated going home on Tuesdays. Took us a year to figure that out. So it's not what you think it is sometimes. It's sometimes very, very different. Right? So again, there's some really unique strengths that come along with that. So being able to hyper focus, stay on topic, being honest and straightforward. Sometimes they are so clear in their explanation and with their regards to their wants or desires, that sometimes we're almost a little bit set back by the communication, but it's something sometimes we can maybe learn a little bit from. They enjoy problem solving, and have a better or unique understanding of set skills. And all of these things, if we were looking for this as in an adult with a skill set on a resume, we would be like, yes. But for some, when it comes to children, we're seeing these unique challenges or the unique things, we kind of say, well, what's going on? We're not quite understand. We don't know how to make it fit into that classroom. Okay, go ahead. So during this presentation, I was going to be focusing on 4. I might really speed through them, but we'll go to the next one. So the first one that we wanted to focus on mostly was the autism spectrum condition. So it's a developmental condition that's caused by brain differences. And I'm happy to say, uniquely, I don't know if anyone's Googled anything, but they actually think they have found some kind of gene that is represented. And it wasn't one of their main high protein genes. It was a genome. It was actually a docile, a dormant gene. They just discovered it. So everybody can start Googling. It just came out. So we have an inch. We have an inch. And it's a great day. Okay. So autism affects 1 in 36 children, and this was through Autism Speaks, but I believe that there's potentially that number is actually we're close to 1 in 42 at this point. They're noticing that most children are getting their final or overall diagnosis by the age of 8 after they've already been assessed as a younger child. But in our far north, we're lucky if their first assessment is at the age of 8. So whereas if some areas or access are able to have screening and assessments done as early as 18 months. And if a child who has exposure and opportunities to early interventions early in life, assessments and or observations can begin as early as 14 months. Go ahead. So there is no cure for autism, and we still don't know exactly why it happens. So we're left today to understand and figure out how do we make this world and make ourselves make it make sense to everybody. Because I don't think they need to change. And I don't think we need to change. We just all need to adapt. So also keep in mind that increased risk. So the risk factors is that if you have had a child or if you have someone in your family, the risk increases. But there's a difference between risk and cause. And right now we do not know the cause. Okay. So autism in the classroom, it's becoming a unique experience. We're just seeing an increase of neurotypical or neuroatypical or typical behaviors. And it is affecting classrooms globally, which is also what makes this a little bit alarming because it's not segregated. It's not to a class. It's everyone is being touched. with autism. So individual children with autism have their own unique ways of processing information, as well as their learning styles. It's essential to understand that these needs for each children and each understanding of broad learn of autism. So again, every child a little bit different. We can all use unique strategies to help move us along. But again, everything will need to be adapted at real time. But so going almost back to the basics, and I read through about 9, 10 different literature articles, information, quick tips, and it comes back to this. It's almost, I don't want to say back to basics, but I remember doing this and when working as a spec ed teacher, helping children, that routine and transition, but that doesn't only help with children with autism, it helps all children. And sometimes figuring out how we can do that better. We sometimes get a little bit of a fancy or we forget those simple timelines, but they're really good. And we think, oh, by grade 3, they don't need that. No, they do. So having those set timelines is really good time management and understanding. Visual cues, we'll talk a little bit about that. Using pictograms, using time, using visual timers, sand timers, all those wonderful fun things in the classroom. Using specific or special interests. So sometimes children with autism will have unique or defined or specialized interests, I call it. And so use those opportunities to help enhance classroom activities. Incorporate sensory tools and support social skills and practice. So this is something we don't often do, but we might have to start thinking about practicing those forms of social skills. Go ahead, Jen. So for some children with autism, transitions in daily scheduling might be difficult to manage independently. For example, free play time in classrooms, and then it's time to transition to circle. There's too much happening, and I've worked in lots of classrooms. That transition piece, we're either singing and we're moving, or we're counting, or we're flicking, we're doing unique things to get kids moving, transitioning from one step to another. So we have to be mindful of how we can start that process and start that routine. So sometimes giving them a warning, a timer, using weighted blankets, or giving them a weighted stuffy, saying, okay, now it's your time for your stuffy. That means we're going to be transitioning it. That gives them a few minutes to think about what they're doing and transition from their work. And now they're focusing on this. So they're able to go, it's kind of like that medium, like a little buffer in between little steps. And I've seen it work. There's no real right or wrong way to do it. It's a little bit of trial and error, but it actually does work really well. And the child just knows, oh, we're getting ready for cleanup. So they hold their buddy, they take care of their task. When they go back in their line, then they put their buddy away. And they did the transition without you even having to explain it, because they know what's going to happen next. Because buddy can't go outside, but they're getting ready for recess. Okay, go ahead. So using visual cues is one of the huge things. And we used to only use that for children with who had auditory or they wouldn't able to speak, or but using pictograms all day, all long, all ages, it works really well. And we forget how to incorporate that, because we think that it's only a tool for communication, but it actually is just good communication across the board. One of the best ones I used to work on was first and then. Well, we use that first we do this, and then we're going to do this. And I would have them build pictogram. So I had all the set of the days of the class or what we were doing. We'd say first we're doing this, then we're doing it. And that's all I would tell about the day. Don't go through the whole day in one shot. That's too much information. First and then. It's almost, keep it simple. And then there's another strategy that we do is practice waiting. Wait. So it's using either a small puzzle piece, or using a small little puzzle, or using a timer, giving something for them to do while they ask you to wait, or while you ask them to wait. When someone asks us to wait, we will find things to keep us doing. We'll either go get a drink of water, make coffee, pick up our phone. We'll do something to kind of help us transition to that wait time. Young children, we don't give them much. We say sit and wait. That's not going to work well. So say while you're waiting and I need 3 minutes, build this little quick puzzle. And so one of the ones that I had was a picture of a clock, and it was in 6 little Velcro puzzle pieces. They would get the envelope, build the clock. It literally would give me 2 minutes, but it was 2 minutes, and that child had something to focus on. And then it also made me realize, be mindful of what I need you to wait for. Do you really need to wait? Or then sometimes I would have them just stay right here, just stay right here. And I need to do this, but stay right here. I'm not forgetting you. Sometimes we forget that these children can't wait, but it's important to learn how to wait, and we have to teach wait. It's a life skill. We all wait. So giving them techniques or ways that they can cope while they're waiting. So special interest was about using things that they like to help incorporate some of their learning and or extending in storytelling or encouraging them to use language or words. Also a way to engage socialization opportunities as well. So incorporating sensory tools. Do you remember when fidget spinners first came out? I think everybody had them. But where are they today? Some classrooms have them. Some have them on a shelf in an area for when you want them. Some classrooms are still open to kind of having every child having one and having something to play with. In some classrooms, it's more of a, well, it's fidget's time. So now you can go. So you have to find that balance. So sometimes if you need to take that away from a child, you're taking away how they're able to process or how they're able to manage their stress. So weighted pads, we used to have bean bags, big heavier bean bags that would actually fit across your lap. And the children would sit there and rub also the little beads that are in it. They liked that texture. It was quiet, but they were able to sit. It was probably one of my favorite things. And I also found it helped children if they need to transition from one activity to another activity. When they feel that little bit more grounded, they're actually able to move through the classroom a little bit better. So those unique tactile sensory things, we don't understand what it does for when you do it, it doesn't make sense. But sometimes you just need to find that right thing. I had this one little boy, that was what he wanted all day long. He just wanted that. He carried it. He flung it over his shoulder when he just always needed to have it. And then we ended up getting him a fanny pack, and he carried it in a fanny pack. He went outside with it. That's what he needed. He needed to feel that grounded. He didn't feel, he was constantly moving because he didn't feel grounded. So we helped him. It's just finding simple ways. There's no real magic wand. There's no real specific tool that's going to make it fix everything. We just have to figure it out. Go ahead. Practicing social skills. So this is a really unique tool. And it feels odd when we first try to do it, but practicing the everyday social skills of how do you have a telephone conversation, greeting people on the phone? How do you place an order at Tim Hortons? How do you ask a friend, how was your day? How do you, it's those social cues and those interactions need to be modeled and role modeled and practiced. And we think that we're doing it for the child who needs that interaction, but you would be surprised at how much it benefits the other children in the classroom to experience that as well. Right now, we are in such a technical difference of children are not communicating and socializing the way that they have it as effective in the past. So going through those like simulations and those types and saying, thank you, I appreciate you. I think this morning it was somebody who was sending a text and hi, I'm thinking of you. I think you're amazing. Have a wonderful day. Those genuine compliments of saying, thank you. I appreciate that, hearing that. So I think all children need those chances to hear those wonderful words. Sometimes, and then the other thing is the unwritten rules of engagement. So that's when they were younger, we would say only 3 can play, only 2 can play. But how do we manage that in a classroom respectfully, but and so that child also learns those cues of it. They're not just being mean. This isn't bullying, but you need to understand there's a way to enter groups, because sometimes it's how they enter or when they're coming in or they're just awkward in the group. So we have to kind of figure that out. So this is where that social interaction coaching is really, really important. And starting as young as we can and making time for, we're going to do a social practicing for all children actually is really beneficial, and it really supports children who have that hard time or who may be having those challenges. Go ahead. Next one. So we're going to skip this video. We're going to move forward. So so we talked about autism. The other thing that we want to also talk about is fetal alcohol syndrome, because fetal alcohol syndrome is a lifelong disability that affects the brain of people and they were exposed in the room. The reason why we're talking about FAS is that it's still very common, but now because many of the traits are similar to autism, we're sometimes maybe misdiagnosing or misseeing the signs and symptoms, because you can have different varying levels of FASD. So it's really important that we still think about this. Go ahead. So fetal alcohol syndrome is also FAS, refers to a wide range of physical, behavior, and cognitive impairments. Then we have partial FASD, which is partial anomalies to growth delays. However, they still may have some high functioning skills, but they may have maybe a little bit slower in cognitive speech delay, things like that. And then you have alcohol related neurodiversity changes, the ARND, which actually is an impairment and a physical changes. You can see physical changes in children's bodies. So again, there's different types of exposure, and we're always still being mindful of that. We have to understand that this also has to do with long-term addictions. Alcohol, it's very still present in children and in many families across the world. Okay, go ahead. Okay, we'll go to the next one. This also leads us to ADHD. So many children who are FAS or many children who have autism also have ADHD. At one time, they were considered the umbrella term, where you had many, many different things. So we need to be mindful or start being aware of, do we know where this is really coming from before we just say it's autism? Because I think we're doing other disservice also to the families and children if we're not ensuring that we get the right supports and services, as well as the right long-term supports for families. Go ahead. So again, ADHD, there's no main cure. However, genetics do play an important role. Experts agree that ADHD is present from birth, and it is usually recognized until children are put into school. And ADHD doesn't mean that you can't be successful in life, but it means you need to adapt your surroundings. There are many adults today who are high functioning, working really well in high level jobs, who have ADHD, and with medication and or treatment, you can have a high quality life. But what we're learning though is that many adults are just being diagnosed now, and they didn't realize they had it, but they had a hard childhood, they had a hard time with relationships, they had a hard time transitioning and making changes. They just struggled. We see those things. And part of that is that ADHD. So in understanding that this is something that it carries with you throughout the lifetime. As you get older, you get better at trying to figure out and managing. But again, today there's so much progressions and change when it comes to medications, therapies, treatments, counseling. It all helps you when trying to figure out how you work best. And then when we see children and or families, we're seeing families now who have ADHD parents, and we see the effects that kind of are trickled down, and we realize this is generational. And it causes a unique set of learning environments, whether it be in home and or once they get to school as well. Go ahead. So again, we see some of the same challenges. They have trouble sitting, calm classrooms. Again, they need a lot of support and stimulation sometimes, whereas we sometimes try to understimulate, but we have to find that balance. We have to find the thing that actually sometimes, is anybody here who when they're trying to read a book, do they have to have the radio going? Yeah. So I've tried to read in a quiet room. I can't process, but if I put music on or put a radio on, then I can actually read. It's quite unique. It's just how your brain engages and how certain things turn on and certain things can turn off. So sometimes children just need to physically move. Some children just need to have a toy or something to fidget. Um, there's no real right or wrong way. Again, it's about what do you need to make you do and function and process to your best ability. And I think we need to start asking children, what do you need? Not about what can I give you? I'm going to give you this, this, and this. What do you need? What will help you? Because they are too trying to figure it out themselves. They might not even have the answer of what they need if they can tell you. And then you can offer solutions. But sometimes they're just still trying to figure it out themselves as well. Go ahead. Go ahead. Then we have another one is the ODD, so oppositional defiant disorder. And this we're finding is it's kind of along ADHD, but just in a little bit of a different it's unique and distinct on its own. So it's a type of behavior disorder in children, most commonly diagnosed in children. They show patterns of a cooperative, defiance, unfriendly behavior towards peers, parents, teachers, and others. And when I hear this, or when I first started doing some learning about this, this is what I feel that the teenage years are. This is what ADHD looks like in teenage years. So it's not, and it is being diagnosed more in the early adolescent. Go ahead. So we have childhood onset, which is presented from an early age and requires early interventions. And there are a few children who may need early intervention in those areas. But then we're also with adolescent beginning suddenly. And so I say suddenly, like it's just almost like we don't know if that's hormones. We don't know if that's life experience. We don't know if it's trauma. We don't know if it's just something unique settings, but something just kind of happens. And it's not a night and day, but it's like you can start thinking about what's happening and you can almost see a change. So, but it's something that they are very mindful of because we know that at different ages and stages, as our body changes through hormones and releases all those endorphins, that our brain chemistry changes as well. So this is why they're being mindful of understanding what's happening. Okay, go ahead. So there's biological factors when it comes to ODD. So a parent with history of ADD or ODD, a parent with mood disorders, depression or bipolar. So we're seeing that if we have families who have some mental health concerns or challenges and how they're managing, it could stem down. A parent with a substance or disorder, or simple exposures to toxins. Then we also have psychological factors, whether it be neglect or absent parenting, difficult forming relationships or poor relationships with parents. And then as well as social factors, chaotic environments, lacking of supervision and or uninvolved parenting. Go ahead. So again, treatments, very similar somewhat to ADHD and FASD and there's some autism, but there's therapy, there's medication, forming responsible or positive relationships, setting expectations, using positive reinforcement and social interactions. But kids are creative. They are determined and they follow their own trails. They make their own path and use that instead of taking what is not quite that sometimes bothers us because they're kind of on their own agenda. They're doing use that to your best ability, or use that to your next what you can do in a classroom. Go ahead. And then we have child trauma. What we're learning is that we're also learning the effects of early exposures to trauma and or lifelong trauma. And it refers to a scary, a dangerous, violent, or life-threatening event that happens to a child. And we're saying 0 to 18. So this can be something that happens to them or something that they see and or experience. So trauma, we know it impairs your emotional and your cognitive abilities are disrupted on how to manage and process information in traumatic settings. If everyone's heard of the fight or flight. So this is also part of those. How do we manage? How do children manage high escalations of energy, whether that be anger, frustration? So helping them through those emotions. We're learning right now a lot of that social emotional regulation is really impaired, that we're seeing there's been a disconnect. Children are not able to read the signs and skills. They're not able to read the cues in social situations, and they're not able to identify their own feelings and how to manage through them. When you see a child become angry over a situation, you understand. But when we start seeing children actually go from flight to flight, they're all of a sudden they get really, really angry and fall down, then we're really concerned and we approach it differently. But we almost need to be approaching it almost with the same type of urgency, to say that I hear you, I respond, I recognize, just as you would as a first responder if you see somebody were to do a flight experience. Anger and frustration and emotion is very powerful, and we need to understand and help children understand that they can use it as a good tool to help them communicate through life, and also connecting and finding those people, those, I call them champions in your life, who you can connect with to share that information and make those relationships with. That is what will help you with those next processes. Go ahead. And many times as teachers who are actually sometimes one of those main connectors. So again, 3 types of trauma. We have acute trauma, kind of from a single incident. We have chronic, which is repeat exposure or prolonged. And then we have complex trauma, exposure to multiple traumatic events. So again, looking at unique, different ways of how this experience. Okay, go ahead. We're just going to go right to the end. Perfect. So there are a variety of ways to help with if you have a child who is experiencing some challenges, connecting with your healthy baby. So I'm talking about not your little young ones. So if you see a child who's needing support services, we can connect with healthy babies, healthy children in communities. Jordan's principal coordinators, they can help if you're in need of certain devices, or if you're looking at specific things for supports. Community elders can help you with connecting back to traditional ways of parenting and how we can see how we can best support children and or provide some family supports. Parent Support Network, which is a private Facebook group that the Early Years Department has been overseeing, and we have a collection of unique parents who have come together voluntarily once a month, and we share resources and information, and we have guest speakers, but they themselves have opportunities to share and cross-share information from parent to parent or grandparent to grandparent. It's a sharing circle. It's an opportunity to talk about what's working, what's not working, what frustrations, what are successes. It's an open place just to connect. Go ahead. So, and we also have, this is where I really wish Toby was here, because Toby, well, I didn't tell you why Toby wasn't here. Toby decided to have a baby earlier than planned. So she was scheduled to be here with me. And then on Wednesday morning or Thursday, she said, my water broke. And I said, like, oh my gosh, you're going to the hospital. She's like, yeah, so you have to present by yourself. And I'm like, your water broke. You need to go to the hospital. We'll figure this out. So, but Toby was actually quite instrumental in making and developing these resources. And so I was hoping that this would have been her last legacy, but so I'll give her the to-do to it. So I don't know if you've had the opportunity to see them on our table, but we have an autism guide. Where did my clicker lady go? Go ahead next. There we go. There we go. So we have the autism guide, and we have accompanied 4 smaller little booklets, and we find our parents are really like these small little booklets, and they're really good, quick information tips. What is autism, signs and symptoms? What can I do to help my child? And then keeping my child safe. And then the guide is mainly geared for parents, caregivers, and people who work with children. Initially, we were building something for educators, consultants, and or a bit of a higher level professional, but we realized we're actually going to start from the ground up. We're going to start with parents and families first, and we're going to learn from there. Which leads me to, I had put on everyone's table, it looks like a research application. I may have not put it on your table, Jen. I think Sherry's holding it up. Actually, Sherry, would you mind? So we have a small research partnership that we're working with Holland Bloor with. So it is a research project that is helping us build a northern approach, a northern strategy with the National Autism Framework. The good news is Canada is working on a framework and we're close to having it released. Yeah, we are anticipating it to come for October of this year. So NAN Early Years has been working diligently with Autism Alliance, Autism Ontario. And I had the privilege of attending the Autism Summit, Canadian Autism Summit, just this past March with Deputy Grand Chief Ashni Panishkam, and she made the urgent and she was very clear at saying that we need to have a unique approach for the northern communities, for NAN communities. And it's so apparent that we get voices and information shared to be able to help us create a framework that works for NAN traditional communities and or for Northern Ontario. So that this questionnaire that I have on the table is that if you are working with a family, working with a child, or have had some experience of trying to help navigate what's going on right now, this is where we really need your voice. Right now, what's happening across the communities is very different. Some communities have taken now have opportunities. They bring in their own psychologist to help doing assessments. Some communities are waiting to be using Access OAP. They're trying to wait for their invitation. But unfortunately, most of the time when children at a young age were to try to apply for OAP, they age out before they even get a chance to go into the core clinical services. And so now we have parents who are still on the wait list, but we don't know where this wait list is, and they have stopped taking applications. So we're in a bit of a stall, and we have parents waiting. So some families are trying to do the best that they can in any which way they can. So the research that we have here is, again, this is a participant research. We're looking for stories. That's all we're looking for. And why those stories are so important is they will help us when we have to learn how to navigate of what's happening across the territories. Because I don't think we're going to be able to have a one-size-fits-all plan, but we're going to need some direction from communities across the territories so we can make a better framework, a better system. We almost would like to make a map for communities to be able to use that they can kind of follow. This is your concern. Who do you see? Like a checklist. Have you talked to this person? Have you talked to this person? Next steps are this. We'd like to be able to try and do that. But we know that in each community that's going to be slightly different. But the main players are going to be existing. So on that note, I tried my best to bring us everything I can.